Have you ever felt invisible in the eyes of a man you care deeply about? Like your presence simply doesn't move him anymore? You try to talk. He nods, barely listening. You try to connect. He pulls away. You offer love, and he offers silence. And deep inside, something starts to hurt. A quiet, aching question begins to echo. What happened to us? But what if I told you that his indifference has nothing to do with your worth? That you are not unlovable. You are not too much. You are not wrong. And most importantly, what if you could shift it? What if you could transform that coldness, that distance into warmth, into presence, into real love? Not by chasing, not by begging, not by twisting yourself into someone you're not, but by reclaiming a truth so powerful, so magnetic, that it makes love flow back into your life without forcing anything. This is not a fantasy. It's a remembering of your energy, your radiance, your sacred role in the dance of love. You see, Louise Hay taught us that our outer relationships mirror our inner relationship with ourselves. When we feel unworthy, we attract emotional rejection. When we abandon our hearts, we draw partners who abandon us. But when we heal, everything begins to change. So today I invite you on a journey, not to fix him, but to come back home to you. Because when a woman returns to her inner power, she becomes irresistible, not by force, but by frequency. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever tried to earn his love? Perhaps by being extra nice, always available, never complaining, holding back your truth to keep the peace, shrinking your needs just so he won't feel overwhelmed. But the more you gave, the less he saw you. That's because love cannot be earned like a prize. Real love recognizes. It flows toward light, not toward desperation. This is where we begin, not by changing him, but by shifting your vibration. Because the most magnetic women are not the ones who try harder, they are the ones who remember who they are. So let's talk about energy, about how, without saying a word, you can begin to shift the dynamic between you and him, not with manipulation, but with alignment. There's a sacred space inside every woman. A space that says, I am enough as I am. I do not chase love. I radiate it. When you embody that space, something unexpected begins to happen. The same man who once seemed indifferent starts to notice, starts to lean in, because he senses something different in you, something he can't quite explain. It's not what you wear, it's not what you say, it's what you believe about yourself in silence. Louise Hay always said, the point of power is always in the present moment. That means it's not too late. The power to transform this dynamic is already in your hands, or more precisely, in your thoughts, in your beliefs, and in your energy. Let's go deeper. When a man becomes distant, we often think it's something we did wrong, but his indifference might just be a reaction to your disconnection from yourself. Are you truly present in your body? Are you honoring your feelings? Are you giving yourself the love you keep waiting to receive from him? Because when you stop abandoning yourself, the world, yes, even him, starts responding differently. Let me give you something tangible. Instead of asking, why doesn't he love me like before? Try asking, what part of me have I stopped loving recently? Did you stop honoring your needs? Did you stop speaking your truth? Did you abandon your creativity, your joy, your sensuality, to fit into the idea of who he might want? When a woman suppresses her essence, she becomes invisible. Not because she isn't valuable, but because she's hiding the very light that makes her magnetic. So the first step to transforming his indifference into true love is not to get louder with him. It's to get more intimate with you. Sit with yourself. Ask yourself, where have I dimmed my light to be accepted? And then, am I ready to turn it back on? Because when you do, something shifts. You stop waiting, you stop needing, and you start radiating. This is the energy that pulls love in, not just from men, but from life. It's the energy of a woman who no longer needs to prove her worth, who doesn't beg for love, because she is love. From that place, you'll notice. He starts to shift. He looks at you longer. He listens deeper. He asks questions he didn't care about before. And you won't even need to explain why. It's energy. It's embodiment. It's you remembering yourself. And the irony is, the moment you stop trying to change him is the moment he starts feeling the pull to change for you. Because love isn't logical, it's magnetic. And the most powerful magnet is a woman who has come back home to herself. One of the most misunderstood truths about relationships is that we often try to fix what's visible while ignoring what's energetic. When a man turns cold or distant, our instinct is to react, to fix, to ask more questions, to demand clarity, to push for connection. But in doing that, we forget something sacred. True love doesn't bloom in pressure. It grows in space. It blossoms when we let go of control, not as surrender, but as self-trust. So if he's pulling away, here's a revolutionary question to sit with. What would happen if I stopped trying to bring him closer, and instead brought myself closer to my truth? This is not about playing games. It's not silence as punishment. It's silence as healing. Because in that space you meet the most important person in this entire story. You. You meet the woman who forgot how magical she is, the one who once danced freely, laughed fully, expressed boldly, and who slowly began to shrink herself in hopes of being loved. But here's what Louise Hay would remind you. You've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. That's not just a nice quote, it's a power move. Because when you shift from self-criticism to self-approval, you stop needing validation from someone who isn't giving it freely. You reclaim the throne of your own worth. And from that throne you don't chase, you choose. Now listen carefully. When a woman returns to her radiance, it reorders the emotional dynamic in a relationship. It shakes the foundation of his certainty. It reminds him that you are not a background option. You are the center of your own universe. And something awakens in him. Not just desire, not just curiosity, but reverence. The kind of love that doesn't come from pressure or performance, the kind that flows naturally because it's drawn to light. But here's the beautiful paradox, that love doesn't come by needing it. It comes by no longer needing it to feel whole. That's when love becomes real. Because the more you choose yourself, the more you embody the vibration of someone who knows she is already loved. And love mirrors that. Now, let's explore the deeper emotional mechanics. Men, whether they show it or not, are deeply attuned to energy. They can sense when a woman is anchored in herself, or when she's emotionally outsourcing her sense of security. And whether consciously or not, they respond to that. If he feels that your emotional state rises and falls with his behavior, he will eventually pull back, because the weight of your happiness becomes something he resents instead of cherishes. But when he feels that you're already emotionally fulfilled, with or without him, something shifts. Your presence becomes choice, not need. And choice is what awakens healthy masculine devotion. Not dependency, not desperation, not manipulation, but freedom. The freedom to walk away, the freedom to stay, the freedom to love from fullness, not emptiness. This is the kind of energy that inspires transformation, not just in him, but in you. Because the goal is never just to get him back. The goal is to become the version of yourself who would never again settle for indifference, because she remembers how worthy her heart is. She doesn't plead for affection. She doesn't shrink for attention. She doesn't ask permission to shine. She simply shines. And in her light, everything real returns. It may be that he steps forward, or it may be that someone else, someone more aligned, appears. But what matters is this: you will never again abandon yourself just to be seen by someone else. Because you've realized the most precious gaze is the one you offer yourself. You are no longer the woman who waits. You are the woman who chooses. And that choice changes everything. Sometimes we think that in order to be loved, We must prove our loyalty through endurance. We wait. We hope. We stay silent, convincing ourselves that if we just hold on a little longer, he will wake up and realize what he's losing. But love is not proven through suffering. Enduring emotional absence doesn't earn affection, and suppressing your truth never creates real intimacy. So I want to invite you into a different kind of love story. One where your feelings are not inconvenient. One where your voice is not too much. One where your worth is not negotiated by how he treats you. It begins with this simple truth. You don't need to become someone else for him to love you. You just need to become the version of yourself who stops tolerating emotional crumbs. Because love that is born from authenticity feels different. It feels peaceful, safe, alive. But to access that kind of love, you must first become deeply honest with yourself. Not angry, not resentful, just honest. Ask yourself, am I pretending to be okay with lesser just so I don't lose him? Because if you are, my love, you're already losing yourself. And no relationship, no matter how intoxicating, should cost you you. Now let's go even deeper. Because this isn't just about relationships, it's about your energy blueprint, the one you were born with, but slowly disconnected from. Louise Hay believed that we carry beliefs that were never ours to begin with. Maybe somewhere in childhood, you were taught that you had to be quiet to be accepted, that your emotions were too intense, that being loved meant pleasing others, that your needs didn't matter as much, and now those beliefs are shaping your adult relationships. But here's the miracle. What was learned can be unlearned. Every single day, you are rewriting your story with your thoughts. So when you begin to affirm, I am worthy of deep, nourishing love, when you say, my feelings are valid and beautiful, when you choose to believe, I deserve presence, not distance, you are doing more than just speaking pretty words. You are reprogramming your subconscious. You are rebuilding the foundation of how love lives in your body. And from there, you naturally stop settling for emotional starvation. You become so full of your own light that any form of indifference simply doesn't feel like love anymore. And here's what happens when you shift at that level. You begin to make different decisions. You stop texting first just to feel seen. You stop waiting by the phone. You stop analyzing every message. You stop explaining your worth to someone who isn't listening. Not out of anger, but because you're no longer trying to convince someone to love you. You're inviting someone to meet you at the level you now hold yourself. This is when the dynamic transforms, because love cannot breathe in fear, but it flourishes in self-trust. So when you come back to your center, your nervous system settles. You no longer react. You respond. You no longer cling. You choose. You no longer perform. You are. And the energy that comes from that is magnetic. It says, I see myself clearly. I honor my heart deeply. And I only allow in what reflects the love I've already given myself. This is not ego. This is sacred self-respect. And ironically, it is the very thing that awakens love in others. Because love, real love, rises in the presence of someone who doesn't fear their own light. So if you've been dimming yourself to maintain his interest, pause. Breathe. Remember who you were before the world told you to shrink, before you made your worth dependent on his attention, before you forgot that you are the miracle. You don't need his validation to be lovable. You don't need his attention to be radiant. You don't need his affection to be enough. You already are. And once you truly know that, not just in your mind, but in your body, in your breath, in your walk, everything around you starts to respond to that truth. Even him. There's a moment, often quiet and invisible to the outside world, when a woman stops waiting for love and begins to embody it. It doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's just a breath, a pause, a soft inner whisper that says, I choose me now. This moment is sacred. Because from here, everything begins to realign. Not just in how you feel, but in how others feel around you, including him. You may not notice it immediately, but something subtle shifts. The way you enter a room, the way you carry your silence, the way you don't fill empty space just to be accepted. He notices. Maybe he can't explain it, but he feels something he hasn't felt in a long time. Your mystery, your depth, your essence. Because when a woman stops pouring herself into someone who doesn't hold her with care, her energy recalibrates. And suddenly, she becomes unforgettable. That's the secret most people don't talk about. The more you chase, the more invisible you become. But the more you return to your center, the more unforgettable you are. And not because you're trying to be remembered, but because you're finally remembering yourself. Let's talk now about emotional self-containment. It's a concept many women haven't been taught because we were raised to believe that connection means merging, that love means constant access, that being close means being available at all costs. But true feminine power doesn't come from being accessible. It comes from being present and selective. You are not meant to give all of yourself away to someone who hasn't earned access to your heart. Emotional self-containment is not coldness. It's not pretending you don't care. It's the ability to hold your feelings without needing someone else to regulate them. It's choosing not to react to his silence because you've learned how to create safety inside yourself. And that is deeply attractive, not just emotionally but spiritually, because men are drawn not just to beauty, but to emotional sovereignty. The kind of woman who feels deeply, but isn't undone by someone else's absence, who can say, with softness and certainty, "I care about you, but I will never abandon myself to be chosen." That sentence alone changes the frequency of a relationship, because it puts you back into the role you were born to live, not as a beggar of affection, but as a chooser of love. And love that is chosen, not chased, always feels different. Now let's move into something even more powerful, the energy of non-resistance. Louise Hay taught that when we stop resisting what is, we allow space for what can be. So many women exhaust themselves trying to change a man's behavior, fix his distance, decode his moods. But what if you stopped resisting his indifference and started accepting it as a mirror? Not as a punishment, not as proof that you're not lovable, but as sacred information. Because his lack of presence is showing you where you've abandoned your own. His emotional walls are pointing to the places where your own boundaries have collapsed. And when you stop resisting that truth, something miraculous happens. You no longer try to make him feel what he doesn't. You simply decide to feel what you need. You don't try to be enough for him. You remember you were already enough before he ever entered your life. And from that place, your energy becomes so clean, so magnetic, that it either calls him forward with clarity or clears space for someone who can meet you with open eyes and an open heart. But either way, you win. Because you're no longer chasing love. You're creating it, you're holding it, you're becoming it. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is more powerful than a woman who no longer makes her lovability dependent on anyone's approval. There's something profoundly healing about a woman who no longer performs for love. She doesn't laugh louder just to be liked. She doesn't bend her truth just to keep the peace. She doesn't shrink her brilliance for the comfort of a man who can't yet see it. And that stillness in her, that calm rootedness, creates a ripple. Because indifference often thrives where there is fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being enough. But when a woman stops fearing herself, stops fearing solitude, stops fearing her own truth, then indifference has nowhere to grow. It loses its power, because it's not being fed by her anxiety anymore. At its core, emotional detachment from a man is not about revenge. It's not about making him chase. It's about making space for clarity. Sometimes when we stop talking, we finally hear our own voice. sometimes when we stop reaching out. We notice how far we've wandered from our inner sanctuary. And sometimes when we stop giving everything to someone who's giving us so little, we remember the depth of our own well, and that remembrance is sacred. Let's talk now about receptivity. One of the most misunderstood aspects of feminine energy is the belief that being receptive means being passive. But that's not true. Receptivity is not weakness. Receptivity is strength wrapped in softness. It is the power to allow rather than force. It is the power to invite rather than demand. It is the ability to hold space for what aligns and release what does not. When you're truly receptive, you don't chase after a man's attention. You open yourself to receive what is worthy of your heart, without begging, without proving, without performing. And here's the magic. When you live in that energy, the right man doesn't see your stillness as disinterest. He sees it as depth. Because you are no longer operating from a wound. You are living from a healed center. You're not asking him to fill a void. You're offering him a space to meet you in fullness. And that kind of offering is rare. It's unforgettable. Because most women have been conditioned to believe that love requires effort. Effort to be enough. Effort to keep him interested. Effort to avoid abandonment. But love, real love, doesn't require you to exhaust yourself. It invites you to rest in your truth. Now let's explore something even more transformative, the power of non-attachment. Louise Hay spoke often about releasing control and trusting life. This means allowing things to unfold without gripping, without strategizing, without making someone's behavior dictate your peace. Non-attachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you trust that what is meant for you will stay. And what isn't will fall away, no matter how much you try to hold on. This is terrifying at first. But then, it becomes liberating. Because suddenly you're not walking on eggshells. You're not monitoring every conversation for signs of rejection. You're not trying to decode silence like it's a hidden message. You're simply breathing in your wholeness. And that breath, that grounded presence, becomes the new center of your love life. So if a man is being distant, if he's unclear, unavailable, emotionally numb, you don't rush to fix it. You sit with it. You observe it. You ask yourself, does this nourish me or drain me? And then, instead of reacting from fear, you respond from love. Love for yourself. Love for your peace. Love for the kind of intimacy you truly desire. And now know you deserve. And in that moment, you become unshakable. You are no longer a woman who pleads. You are a woman who chooses her energy over empty promises. You are a woman who no longer fears loss because she knows that nothing real can be lost, only illusions fall away. And then, without you needing to say a word, something changes. He feels it. He feels the shift in your presence, the softness that's no longer desperate but sovereign, the silence that no longer begs but radiates clarity, the distance that no longer wounds but protects your light. He may not understand it fully, but he feels it deeply, because now he's not in control of your emotional temperature. Now you hold that thermostat within yourself. You've become a woman whose energy cannot be negotiated, whose love cannot be reduced to convenience, whose essence demands reverence, or nothing at all. And in the space you've created, not by force but by return, he will feel the pull. Not because you manipulated, but because you remembered. You remembered your worth. You remembered your value. You remembered that you are the beginning of love, not the byproduct of someone else's attention. And here's the most beautiful part. Even if he doesn't change, even if he never returns, you've already won. Because the real transformation wasn't his. It was yours. You've reclaimed your energy. You've stopped bleeding your power into silence. You've become the kind of woman who doesn't settle for less, because she finally sees the more she always was. So whether it's this man or another, you're no longer afraid. You know how to return to yourself now. And from there, you attract everything aligned with the truth you now live. Not because you tried harder, but because you became the woman love cannot ignore. The woman who no longer needs love to arrive, to feel whole. Because she is the arrival. She is the home. She is the love.